It didn't freeze that time. Right, I'm going to hide myself.
You should
Okay.
never hide yourself, Flo.
Pardon?
You should never hide yourself.
Okay, Fleur, why are we here?
Oh, I see. I see how this goes, does it? Ping-ponging the responsibility over to me.
Please.
We just came back from 3 days at Boar Place in Edenbridge in Surrey, which is at the moment a gorgeous countryside retreat, often used for weddings and things, just stunning countryside. But the reason that we were there is that Improbable are hoping to build a creation space there. So they invited us to come and have a flavour of what it's like before they've actually built that. And we decided that we wanted to have a bit of research and development time on improvisation with deaf and hearing folk. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, Improbable they're a company that we worked with on Perfect Show for Rachel, and they have a huge improvisational practice. And you and I used to feel like, although Zoo Co's work is generally scripted, Perfect Show for Rachel being an anomaly, Zoo Co's work is generally scripted. But before we were making deaf and hearing theatre, we always gave ourselves permission for things to kind of change in the work that we were making. So we'd be on stage with a show like The Girl Who Fell in Love with the Moon, and I wouldn't know if there was always that crackle of Fleur might be about to make me corpse, or someone might add something and it ends up being in the show either for that night or on honeymoon. And I think when we started to make deaf and hearing work, partly just from our own lack of language skill, we got really frozen. Like, nothing can change, the captions are there, if anything comes from the audience, because obviously all our work's relaxed, so we get quite a lot of audience audio feedback. We might have someone who's ticking or responding verbally in our work, and we used to be able to kind of like just talk back to that, and then we kind of
Well,
went,
and if we think about when we started, obviously nowadays people know your sister Rachel quite well because of Perfect Show for Rachel. But when she used to come and watch all of our shows that were relaxed, and we would welcome her constant heckling of you on stage. But we would often like want to reference her and welcome her into the world of whatever we were doing, right? And
yeah.
as much to show that like we're okay with it, we want the audience to be okay, not even okay, but like we thrive in that kind of liveness.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, you and I especially have a kind of hook on it feeling like electric and live. And when we started to make deaf and hearing theatre, we started to realise like, oh, there's some language barriers, mainly for the hearing people, to be honest. But in terms of improvising, and although improvising isn't what's important to our shows, we're not asking actors to make up lines on the spot. We respect our writers, and we want scripts to kind of be there to tell stories in the way that we want to tell them. It kind of just felt like the possibility of change was off the table. So for me, I remember feeling like either a bit locked or stuck through my own lack of knowledge or skill.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when you say knowledge or skill, you mean because normally if we are improvising within a scripted text, so adding in a little quip like to include the audience, we would say it verbally. But at this time when we started making deaf and hearing work, our sign language wasn't, our skills were not high enough to be able to then translate that into sign. And then you've got a disparity between who on stage is understanding what's going on, who in the audience is understanding what's going on, and also matching with the captions, which the captions very much fix you into your script.
Yeah, and just the fear of getting any of that wrong was elevated somehow. I'm just getting okay. Sorry, I had a notification about my internet connection. Hopefully it's okay. So I think both of us knew that that was a limitation in our own imaginative thinking or skill set, rather than something that you can't say deaf and hearing theatre can't be extra live. That's definitely not the case. Like, deaf practitioners have been making improvised work for years, and I think every artist wants to come on stage. If you're making theatre, it should be live. There should be this kind of crackling possibility of change, even if you know that you're going to do the same thing again and again every night. Even if you're doing 100 shows, you still want to feel this possibility, because otherwise it kind of feels like you're making a museum piece, or like the artists are just programmed to do something. And I think if you're going to do that, you should make a film, or you should make something that is static and doesn't change and doesn't have an audience right in front of it. So for us, I think this question was, having gone through Perfect Show for Rachel and noticing the occasional worries we held about, okay, Rachel ad-libs the whole way through the show, there is no script. How do we make sure that our deaf audience and our deaf cast members are with those changes in a way that doesn't bring that fear, which everyone has around improv, right? Like that sudden flash of, oh, did I miss something? Am I going to get it wrong? Am I going to fuck up? Like something
And
about that.
yeah, and obviously we're going to like go into detail about what we actually did over these 3 days, but I think right off the top I want to say we haven't solved that question. Like we haven't gone oh, the performance element of it is perfect, but what we have done is explored all of the process and all of the ways in which improv benefits in such a juicy way, the way in which you make work and the way in which you trust each other to be live on stage in ways that maybe in the end result maybe won't even affect the script, but like this feeling and this essence of improv, which we had as young people starting a theatre company, mainly because we were improvising so much. Like we were improvising how to have a company, how to make a show, how to, and also all of our shows were devised, so we were improvising to get to a point of eventually having script. So it's more about like we've refound that kind of crackly, like we're gonna say the word crackle and fizz so much, but that electricity within the making process that I think, even though we haven't solved like, okay, the system is a bit fucked because like captions and stuff need to be exact, but this bit before, we've worked on the step before, and I think that can only be a good thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So these 3 days were about bringing a lot of artists who we think feel similar to us in that they want to be alive on stage. And that sounds like a simple thing, but some artists don't, right? Some artists really want to walk into a rehearsal room and the director says, stand there and play this impression, and they're awesome at following that. But in improbable rooms, even when they're working on scripts like My Neighbor Totoro or an opera, where you cannot change a word of those scripts, they are tantamount and they are completely solid. The artists in those rooms are still being encouraged to stay really alive and really free and follow their gut. So we brought together this incredible room of deaf and hearing artists, and the artist directors of Improbable and Improbable's researcher S, and also lots of our staff and their staff, because being at Ball Place is just a gorgeous place for collaboration anyway. And we wanted to ask them, how do we stay alive and following gut instinct in a specific part of theatre where it can feel like our job is to be accessible before being alive or being artistic. Sometimes if we come in with the wrong responsibilities placed on artists to kind of do that before they've even had a chance to feel into it.
Yeah.
And for me, I think I've been lucky to go to Board Place on various improbable residentials. I've been on 2 of their summer schools this year and last year, and kind of just wanting to share that different space and energy that Croydon, with all love to Croydon, can't bring. Like being amongst the fields and walking to a reservoir every lunch and cooking together and eating together and resting together and all of those things just felt like Board Place is the right place to do that. Someone, I can't remember who the quote's from because of course I can't, but said that Board Place is where they feel the most creative. And I really felt like that. So
Yeah,
we
well,
got
it was as much about connection in the room as connection out the room, which seems like such a basic, obvious thing to say, but like it just is. Like, you know, Improbable wanted to, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, but just from things that they said to us, but they wanted to expand their experience of working with deaf artists. And it's like, well, yeah, and their feedback was, it's not like working with, it's like just being around and being in connection with, and that's what Board Place really allows in like such a gentle and genuine way, like not forcing it, not speeding it up and stuff, which is so nice.
Yeah. So we say it was 3 days, but we actually did Monday to Thursday. Monday was like a hanging out day. We got down there, and after some Tesco delivery wrangling, we went on a big walk. We had dinner together, and then we kicked off with our first evening session, which was, so we work in open space, both of us working out how we bring that into our practice. But
Yeah.
we definitely know that we really appreciate these check-ins. So we checked in how we were feeling about being down. And actually by then loads of people had gone, oh wow, it's so beautiful. So it was kind of like lovely checking in about what it was we would do. And I think something I'm proud of, or I think works, is that we didn't tell anyone that we knew what was going to happen. And we didn't say that we already had a plan. And
Yeah.
we kind of, that meant that we were really clear in the invite about, we probably don't know how some of these practices work. Some of Improbable's practices are really hearing reliant at the moment. A technique that I'm sure we'll get into later, but instant acting is entirely audio based, almost. So we really didn't know what we would find out. And I think you and I both were so excited by that. I mean, I heard us both in those check-ins kind of going like, we really don't know what's going to happen, and we really don't have a secret end goal, which is so rare.
Yeah,
Like sometimes you say like, oh, anything can happen, and you're like, but at the end there's a sharing and
yeah, yeah,
important venues coming, and we really hope it's good. There was just none of that, and I loved the kind of cozy evening check-in vibe and
yeah.
getting everyone. So we write sessions. So me,
Can I hold us there just 1 second, just to go back and just talk really briefly about what open space principles are, because we explained those,
mm,
and also what a check-in is, because loads of people don't do a check-in, and I love a check-in and I really value it. So I can speak about check-in
yeah,
quickly.
yeah, and maybe
We
talk about the journey of how it's changed for us as well.
yeah, yeah. So we'll check in. We all sit in a circle, which is great for access as well. Like we can all see each other. It's a lovely way to be. And then we have something in the middle of the circle. In our case, it's a little Lego man with the word zoo on it that we just happen to find in like a charity bag. But Improbable use a gorgeous like stone. So anyway, you're holding something which dictates whose everyone's attention can be on in that moment, and you would check in about what is alive in you in that moment, or potentially like leading you up to that moment. So people might talk about their day if they feel like it's really like they can't continue with the rest of the day and work if they can't get something off their chest, but it also might be artistically what's alive in you, what you dreamt about the night before, all these things that are sort of with you, behind you, whilst you're in this moment. You've arrived in this moment, but you're not just brand new fresh, you're feeling things already and you've already got things going on. And the reason I love check-in is because a lot of the time I'm distracted by things outside of the room, and actually all I personally need is to just say them out loud often, and then once I've said them, I'm like, oh, it's cool now, everyone knows about that thing or like that feeling or whatever, or and then I can uh, ground into working on what we're actually working on more.
And
Uh,
sometimes bringing it in, right? Like sometimes this like weird, I don't know, nightmare you've woken up from that's charged by the news feed you've scrolled through the night before ends up in the work in some way, like, or you realize someone else is holding that thing too. So it's like, I think there's that old adage of like, oh, leave your baggage at the door of a rehearsal room, like drop it all. And for some people, that is still what they want. They want that clarity of like, what they do. But I think check-in just says, we're not asking you to do that. And I love what Lee always says about like, whichever you shows up is the right person to be there. So if you're tired, be the tired version of you. You don't have to kind of crunch yourself into a different version of yourself.
yeah, and on Perfect Show, for example, like there was just a subject that everyone was talking about that was heavily in the news at the time, and it was concerning so many people in the room that it would have been remiss to just ignore it. And there were enough people, and the importance was held by everyone, that we then decided, okay, that needs space on its own. It's nothing to do with this room, but we need space to talk about that and support each other through that, and think about ways that we can support that cause. So then we organize a lunchtime session or a few lunchtime sessions around that subject. So I like that it's like it gives that possibility for checking in with a group mindset as well, and like a conversation in that
Yeah,
way.
I always say like my favorite plays are ones where it feels like we've built a village, like that everyone's got their functions within it, but we're all an ecosystem. Like I think that thing where you notice the connections between random people in the room or people who don't normally communicate, and we really invite everyone in, right? Like so anyone can check in, and you don't have to. There's no, you can't be good or bad at checking in. You can only notice what you notice, check in with what you want to check in with, and see how it impacts your day, bringing that in. I've had check-ins where I've like I remember one check-in where I sort of overshared something, and I, because of the role I was in the room and because of I could only share half of the information, it ended up sort of worrying people in a way that wasn't useful for me or them. And I was like, oh, okay, that, I can go deep in a check-in and I feel very safe to, but I'm going to work out how I show up in this without putting too much thought into it. Like people always get a bit flustered, but I think it's just that act of like checking in with your body and being looked at by everyone. And I don't know, I think it's a really important process. And Phelan talks about this on My Neighbor Totoro, which I went to see one day of the rehearsal room on My Neighbor Totoro, and I was like, oh, they really do use this improvisational practice and open space practice and checking in on these big West End shows. It's not just something for weird little studio pieces that we might make. It works at scale. And they were explaining, on that show, there's a huge thing that was happening that wasn't the play itself, which is a family story, but which was bringing together a massive community of East Asian artists from all over the world who had a lot to say about how the industry had treated them. And some of their check-ins took half a day and they still did it and they would still show up. And some people might decide that they didn't want to be there, and that's totally okay. But they wouldn't rush through these things because they say, even though the check-in isn't us working on the script or doing our movement cool, it is still building the gut or the belly of the piece, like the foundations of it. And I really felt like that. I really feel like that now that we attend to it. We used to just say, how are you? Which kind of felt like, especially in rooms with lots of disabled, deaf, neurodiverse, chronically ill people, would feel like a check-in of like, what are my access needs today?
Yeah, like
What's wrong with me today or something? And then the best you could be is just fine or excited. Whereas what's alive in me is like, I read this news story and I had this dream or this conversation on the bus, and it's like whatever's pinging, and that feels so much more creative to me now that we've
yeah,
changed the question.
yeah, and like you say, it is. People are still so. I love the check-ins where someone just goes, "I ate 3 croissants," and then just moves it on, and it's just whatever. It's just whatever's
Yeah.
alive. It doesn't need to be more than you want it to be, but yeah. So that's check-in, and then open space principles. Because it was the way that we wanted to work for the 3 days and the way that Zoo Co now works in our spaces. We gave a little explainer about that. Like, is that worth
Yeah,
doing?
so there's two types of open space. There's the principles themselves, which can go with you anywhere, and then there's open space technology, which is kind of involves like session calling, and it's an organizing system for how a group or a community can have lots of big conversations around a topic they all care about. And we're sort of doing a merge of both, but we had a main focus, which was on this improv focus. So open space uses these principles, and we stick these up on the wall wherever we're working. I've actually just, you don't know because you've been away, but I've just stuck them to the back of your computer so that I can see them when I'm at my desk.
Oh,
But they are, whoever comes are the right people. We're here, so we're the right people. Anyone who hasn't come for whatever reason isn't the right person because they're not here. Whenever it starts is the right time, which I won't go into too much, but whenever it starts, we have these really rigid ideas in, I was going to say theatre, but in life, like, oh, well, you were late, so we couldn't get any work done. Or, oh, so and so went on a walk all lunchtime and then the session was changed. Or, oh, I had an idea when I woke up, but we haven't started work yet. Like this idea that time locks us into the periods when we can be creative. And attached to that is when it's over, it's over. So if we all come together for 3 days and say we're going to work on improv with the deaf and hearing practice, and 1.5 days in we'd solved it, we wouldn't have stuck around going, oh, but we said we'd spend 3 days. We'd have worked on something else, or we'd have relaxed or whatever. Sadly, we didn't solve the whole exciting challenge of deaf and hearing collaboration. But equally, when it's not over, it's not over. And I think that was something I really heard at the end of this week, and I think you've already hinted at, is like this work can carry on for weeks and weeks or months and months or maybe a lifetime. So when it's not over, it's not over. That meant that sometimes we'd check out and then the conversations would just carry on over dinner or on the wall.
I mean, I feel like at Ball Place, like we never wanted to end the conversations. We were like, no, right up until like we're walking out the door and we're still like all trying to.
Yeah, you didn't even leave the station, right? Because you didn't want to say goodbye because you guys were still talking about.
Yeah. We just had so much alive in us from it. Those 3 examples that you've given so far, what I love about the open space principles is I think their main focus is to not fight with reality.
Yeah.
That's my main thing, that I'm like, some people don't like them, but I'm like, but it is reality.
Yeah.
if
Phelan
someone
says,
has arrived late, they have, like, so whether you're annoyed about it or not, it won't, like, it just is reality. And if you just accept reality, you're going to be able to make potentially amazing work with them instead of spending that time being annoyed. I think also for us two girlies, who, time is less of a reality for us. So I think
yeah,
we love that flexibility and we thrive in that. But
and it means you're alive more of the time. I mean, I think people worry about, there's still more principles to say, but I think people worry about this time one as being like, well, if everyone can just say whenever it starts at the right time, we'll never get any work done. But it means I'm working when I'm like on the loo. I'm working when I'm on the wall.
it also means that the principle about whoever comes to the right people is really important, because if you are coming, it's because you want to work.
Mm.
So that fear that people have of like, well, people will just take the piss and they'll just never arrive and they'll never start working. It's like, well, then they're not the right people.
Why would you want them to be there?
Why would you invite people? Like we've invited people who are excited by what we're
Mm.
exploring. So
And yeah, Lee always says, if you don't want to be somewhere, give everyone the gift of your absence. Like, don't assume that you just sitting there having a bad time. Anyway, that's a different principle. But yeah, like this gift of absence as well as collectivity, I think is really big. So we've had whoever comes to the right people, whenever it starts at the right time, when it's over, which also has the caveat of if it's not over, it's not over. And then there's whatever happens is the only thing that could have. And I think this riffs off what you were just saying, but Phelan always says, if you fight with reality, you'll only lose 100% of the time. So it's like, it's saying, I think really useful for us on an open-ended research week. We didn't have a set idea. So what happened was what happened, and it was the right thing for us because it is what it happened. It's a very like it's an annoying approach. And I think some people hear these principles and they think, oh, wishy-washy hippie stuff. And then you go, no, because if whatever happens is the only thing that could have, that means it's on me to say what should be happening right now. Like,
yeah, like to not be complacent. I mean, there was a small moment in the 3 days where, like, because every minute felt precious and exciting, and like you just wanted to make the most of it because we loved the people we were with, we loved the work we were creating. And there was like a 3-minute period where I was like, Flo, is this informing the end the
and we
end
were like,
goal?
let's talk about that. And we did
Yeah,
because there's this responsibility of like, there is no set program that we have to tick off. We're not doing these 10 activities for 3 days. And then if there's time, we'll do something else. It's like, no, what happens is on all of us. Which brings me down to the only law in open space, which is my favorite. I think the whole point of open space is really this, which is the law of mobility. It used to be called the law of 2 feet, which is a very clear visual image, but not the most accessible statement ever, which is if you are not interested, adding to, engaged, enjoying, contributing something to whatever you're doing, then use the mobility you have available to you and go where you are most useful or where you're most needed or where you want to be. And that could be going to speak to somebody else in the room. It could be going on a walk. It could be having a nap. And Matilda, who's one of the ADs at at Improbable, also added on the law of fluidity, which I love, which is about how you are in the space. So you choose where you want to be and whether you want to be there, but also how you are. So if you're like, I would love to be here, but I'm hungry, go grab a snack and bring it back. I'd love to be in this conversation, but I need to lie down. We have beds available in the room. Like, come and be who and how you are we're not going to do the weird act of looking professional. I mean, especially in the theatre context, what's that even mean? We're asking people to be embodied, we're asking people to be present. Well, then you might be present with your hunger or present with your need to move around or whatever, and actually blocking those things can be really uncreative for a lot of people.
yeah. And what I love about that is that when I look around the room, I know that, like, if I'm talking about something, people want to be there. It's also really great. It would be a really great call if, like, I don't know, if for any reason our work, like, if something wasn't accessible or something, then you hope that people would be like, I'm just not useful here. And like people could just leave, and that would really show you something. Luckily that's not happened in our spaces. But I just mean, like, I guess it keeps you on your toes in a way. You're just alive with what's really happening, and people aren't just tolerating it and then and then bitching about it afterwards. It's like, no, like if
You
we're being
chose to say.
yeah, you're supposed to say, which yeah. So
And I think just on that, like, oh, what was I going to say?
oh sorry.
Phelan Moore says that if all performances were relaxed as standard, like ours are, and if audiences really believed that it was for everyone and not just like the disabled person in the front row or whatever, then theatre would get better a lot very quickly, because you'd see everyone leave when they weren't enjoying the play. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's like all of these practices sound like soft and fluffy, but they actually require you to grapple with consent all the time. Like, you can't just say, well, we paid you to be here, so you're here 10 till 6. We're saying we've paid you to be here, but you are welcome to go where you're most useful, which might be going and watching telly if you think the work we're doing is rubbish, or not for you. And so there's this excitement, but it also means that everyone in the circle, everyone in the group is taking responsibility for their own experience in every moment, as far as they feel able to, with the support and encouragement of the room, to have that step away from this hierarchical structure where you say, the director told me to sit here, so I'm sitting here even though it's painful for me or it's not engaging or whatever. So that's what we launched the week with, was this open space mindset, which I think you and I, Fleur, kind of like living and breathing that even when we're not in a rehearsal room nowadays. Like, we're really thinking about how we bring that into the office and how people really can believe that that's okay. Even when we don't live in a world where that, like, school and business and capitalism does not tell us that that's okay, but we find through researching it, through attending to it, so much happens in that time, and that time kind of goes weird and wonderful. And that, there was a point where I thought, oh God, we've gone off piste. And then suddenly in the last sort of half an hour of the workshop on day 3, it was like, oh, I'm so glad.
That, like,
Patient.
mind blown moment.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and now when I'm in a space that isn't open space, which obviously is often, but like in the theatre, when they say, for example, like no readmission, and I feel my body, I feel sick, I feel itchy from the inside. I'm like, it feels painful to have to stay in one position or in one place, or like, I mean, and
yeah, I mean, an artist came out of this going, how do I go into the other rooms that I'm going to be in and tell them that this is what I need to do my best work, which I think is actually a really hard thing to express into rooms that don't want to welcome autonomy.
yeah.
Because it's very hard to not be in control. You know me, I'm a big control freak.
Well, and this takes loads of practice, and I think when we first bring people into it, like, I'm sure it takes a while to trust that you are actually allowed to do those things. Like, it's a really big thing to say. Like, it's easier for us as the company to be like, yeah, man, just be completely honest with us. But with the actor who is thinking, well, but I want a job next year, or I want to work with you guys for whatever reason, like I need money, like these realities of life kick in. And so, yeah, I think it takes time to build the trust and build the experience.
Yeah, and people spoke about the trauma that they arrive with into our rooms. I think you just spoke about this, but like, kind of people arrive. I remember an artist on Perfect Show for Rachel said to me, it's taken me 2 weeks to realise that when you ask me what's alive in me, you actually want to know. I've sat in check-in circles in every job I've done. So I think a lot of people do check in, but they don't really want it to take longer than 15 minutes, or they don't really want to hear how you really are, and they're maybe not asking what's alive in you. And yeah, they said to me, like, it's taken 2 weeks to trust that that's actually what you want. And wow, I'm now realizing that on the other jobs I didn't feel that, even though everyone was saying similar words. So I think it does take a long time to trust those practices, and to trust that when you go for a nap and you come back, you'll be welcomed in with goodwill. Like, I trust that you were doing what you needed to do your work.
Yeah. So we should talk about the work. I'm so excited to talk about the work. The
Yeah, we
work
should.
was incredible. It was a magical 3 days of like, it was so rich and so full. And I'm so excited to try all of the things that we experimented with there. Pretty much all of them I'm excited to try in real life in our rehearsal rooms.
I love that you call it real life, because Ball Place does feel like a dream, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
You always say in real life after something like that, and I'm like, yeah, no, you're right. It was like a dream sequence of time.
So yeah, I'm like, there's loads of stuff pinging for me, and I don't really want to go chronologically.
Yeah, fair. I mean, should we start with how we would start in a room? Like we called sessions. Like so if we're saying everyone's got responsibility, it can't be that Lee and me come in and go, this is a set plan. We do have a planning conversation, but the first bit of that planning conversation is let's find out on big piece of paper what everyone who comes together is interested in. And there was a lot around improvising together, I guess.
Yeah, and I think your planning sessions are good because they create like a menu for you that you go, like we had uh Lee had ideas of improv games that he's played, right? Or that he, I mean, Lee is a master at improv, so he's got all of those sort of up his sleeve. And then it's the reading the weather of the room and like, oh, okay, we really want to do something that encapsulates this, and then picking out a pre-thought of thing that matches. So yeah, this.
Yeah, because artists can say, I really want to have a go at a non-language based game, and then Lee's got this like, yeah, he's got these ideas that he can bring.
Mm.
um I really enjoyed, but actually you set us up on the first thing we did. I know you said no chronology, but it's just in my head. We were playing Werge, word merge, um, with sign and English, and I really enjoyed it. It's a really simple game. It's really fun, and you can't really fuck it up. It's a really good like game for establishing like we don't care if you fuck it up, which is really important in a room like that. I think Phelim and Lee use like brave spaces rather than safe spaces because they're not actually interested in feeling safe all the time because that's not really how being an artist feels. Like
Mm.
an artist, you need to be safe to be on your edge or take risks or whatever. So it requires a bit of braveness, but there's no a bit of courage, but there's no real failure point.
Yeah.
Um,
So two people would come into the circle. They say two completely random words or say or sign two random words, and then let's say you've got imagine having two random words right now, banana and rabbit, and then the next two people would come in and try to find a word that in their minds, and obviously everyone's mind works extremely differently, mine included, they would try to think of a word that for them merged those two things. So William gave a great example with that one with carrot, because it was like, okay, banana, kind of that shape, and it's also like a fruit, and then it's a vegetable, and then rabbit, carrot. So carrot for him was in the middle of banana and rabbit.
but you've only got the time it takes for everyone to count down 3, 2, 1 to do it. So you're like going off your first thought. You're not like the logic of it kind of comes to you after, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, and then if you get the word merge, you have a high five and you've won. And if not, then the next two people have to come and try and word merge your next ones. And I liked that game because I love that game anyway, and we've played it for years. But I liked it because it gave us a really simple setup. So much of this week was about having a really simple task and then being able to talk about what was happening around that. So like the primary focus being, well, we talk about primary process and secondary process. I'm not sure this is quite the right application of it, but like primary process, we're playing this game and we're trying to merge words. But really, not one of us cares whether we win the game or not. But what we are interested in is being able to navigate, okay, we're deaf and hearing. So two people shouting a word at the same time is an instant communication issue. So we would kind of play the game for a bit, and everyone's kind of having fun and getting to understand it, and then going, actually, when we're in a circle, I'm not catching the interpreter. I don't know which interpreter to look at. I don't know who's catching it. So then we set it up as a performance, that an audience and two performers and an interpreter there, and then we added like, okay, we need the interpreters to repeat twice what the words have been so that the next two people have all of the information, to be honest, deaf and hearing, because we had different levels of sign language and English in the room. And I loved how honest people could be about whether it was working for them or not. And then the same person who said, I need more access to this so that I can be on a level playing field, then went, oh, fuck, should we try it without the interpreters? And kind of wanted to see the chaos version of it as well, so
yeah.
that
I mean, moving
failure
it to
could
be
be even
more,
more likely.
yeah, and moving it to be more gestural than word based, and like all those kinds of things made it. I think that was one of the first matches we got was actually on a gesture, like a dance move, rather than a word, and that was
Yeah, the
brilliant.
Michael Jackson dance.
Like, yeah, just every time going like, yeah, why does it need to be a word? Like, actually, like you're saying, what's the essence of this game? It's that two people can have this little brainwave moment where they're linked and they're thinking of the same thing at the same time, and that feels so exciting. So whatever that ends up being,
Yeah, so
um,
true.
yeah, and then that the essence of Werge and what I've just said, like I guess would carry on into loads of them, but
Yeah, and trusting your first thought as well. But like a lot of people, Lee was saying about because you've got like now this like racing line of people who are all like thinking about whether they're going to volunteer to go in, because you choose, you self-volunteer, and people kind of going, oh no. And then the person would say a word and they go, I was going to say that. And Lee was like, oh, just notice how something held you back, even though actually you would have had a partner who was going to say the same word as you. Like, notice what stops you from following your impulse because you're worried you might get it wrong, or you don't feel clear enough, or because you don't know if the other person's going to hold you, or whatever. I think, that's such a simple game that I think if we just told people on a podcast, we played Werge for a really long time, that we might not understand, but the conversations around a game like that and what it's really teaching you. Lee said something like, "This has everything in it," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right, it does." I thought
Well,
about it like that.
and another. So then the next thing we did actually is his thing that he, like, talking about this has everything in it. I would say this is another one that he talks about like that, which is one word at a time. And he talks
Mm,
about in an improv process, he would get people to just play this for hours and hours and days, right? Like, this is his kind of, you can
yeah.
learn everything about improv in this, and about letting go of control and letting go of your idea of where the story's going and just being really willing to go with it. So one word at a time, traditionally,
Should we
or
demo it?
previously, yes, previously would be two people maybe holding on to each other. There we are.
Holding you in my
Um,
mouth.
yeah. Holding on to each other, and then you try to tell a story just one word at a time. So very simply, that might look like this:
I
went
to
a
big
house,
and
then
I
looked
round
the
corner
as
a
fox
leapt
up
at
me.
ah.
Yeah. So we Lee demonstrated that in the way that he's historically done it, and then we were like, okay, how does this work in a room of mixed language? And we tried it with, what did we try it with? We tried it with two hearing speakers, then two BSL users, and we were kind of doing it in different ways like that.
And
Then
it's
we,
yeah, it's fascinating because BSL and English word order are two different things. So we would say a man walked over a bridge. In BSL, the sign would be bridge, a man walked over. So you hit a grammar issue straight away. But the essence of it, Lee always says, is, can two people tell a story as if they are one? That's the essence of the game, is can, and Flo and I just did it and we were going, I went to a house, and then he gets you to smooth the voices and be in the present tense and add action and oh, you've frozen for me. Oh,
hello.
you just froze for a sec. Yeah. Can two people speak as one, or be tell a story as one? Which, so this one word at a time, the rules of that is that you're trying for you're trying to make sentences that make sense. Of course, you fuck it up all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And what,
but in BSL, that there's an immediate, okay, well, we're going to have to boil this down to what the point is, because we actually can't do English meets BSL in the same way. I mean, BSL has, like we were saying, like an English word has a start and an end. Like when you say fox, we know it starts with the F and it ends with the X. In BSL, that fox might be in motion because it's gesticulative. So we're kind of saying, like, there isn't as clear a word end unless, and they tried using sign supported English, so sign language, but in an English word order.
mm,
But and it was just interesting. Sign language doesn't have all the boring like ifs and buts and twos and
mm,
actually it does have a few of those words, but like all the little medium words, like little bits, which just made it completely different for
yeah,
deaf artists. You go.
yeah. Well, no, I was just going to say we quickly realised, so when William and Stephen, who are two deaf BSL users, were doing it, and they were doing it in sign supported English, so SSE, and they were just trying to add in like the little and, it just wasn't like, it wasn't that alive. It wasn't very interesting, We were like, oh, you guys are really good storytellers, and this is kind of like a limitation that maybe isn't serving you two getting to this creative kind of twin brain thing. So then moving it into BSL was interesting, but there was sort of different discussions about like, between them, like, oh, should we be doing BSL word order, and that maybe that wasn't even very helpful because that kind of needs context and like you sort of need more than just one word or one sign
Yeah.
to understand. So then that moved into like, okay, what if we do a couple of signs each? And that is giving slightly more context, but it's still throwing a curveball if the next person has to complete it, and like it's still pinging back and forth. I think we ended up actually, the new name for it, we called it like, we were like, it could be called ping pong instead of one word at a time, because it's just this act of going backwards and forwards and not holding on to your own ideas, but being really willing to go with the other
We
person.
were saying, as long as the game is forcing you to be uncomfortable with the amount of control you either do or don't have constantly, like I'm comfortable when I'm in control. So for me, if I was taking up too much of a sentence, then I would feel like I was leading too much and I'd try and give it back. Or for someone who's more comfortable following, wish it was me, then they might go to take over more to kind of keep in the discomfort, like the uncomfortable, exciting electric rub of I either want to or I don't want to be in charge, and I'm not or I am. William and I found a way of passing, who's BSL user, we found a way of like passing a sign so that we could kind of, my hands could, so we had like a bowl of mushrooms or something, I can't remember, and I would pass it to him and he'd take that bowl and
As
then
in
he
take the hand shape of
take
the
the hand
bowl.
shape of the bowl
Yeah.
to become the same character. And then what was fun in BSL was that we kept on being one character and then we'd split into two sometimes when it was useful and then we'd come back together. Whereas in the one word at a time hearing way, you're always the same person because you're kind of attached together. Whereas with BSL, you need both your hands. So it's a
Yeah,
bit
and you're
more.
two people looking at each other that can tell two different parts of a story, right? You're someone who's just met a cat, and the other person is the cat, and then you're the person, and then actually, and then you go back to telling that story together again, which is so.
Mm,
I love the bit that you said about Lee mentioning that the important thing is to notice the control, because it doesn't mean that like, oh, I've failed or I've won. Like it's just about
mm,
noticing. And when I did my pairing was with Stephen, who we've just mentioned, deaf and BSL using, and we would do a couple of signs and then pass over the next bit of the story. And there were loads of times where we noticed like that one person was like, he was giving me a little bit too much context, or I was giving him like too much of an easy next bit of the sentence or something. So then we'd be in the middle of playing it, we'd then play with each other. So then we went from giving each other like a few words and part of a sentence to, whenever it got to a climactic moment, we would go back to just one word, and that
mm.
became really like exciting because we were like and then but you might not want to do the whole thing like that. So it was really nice. It was just an exploration of control, really.
And what was great was that so Lee has played one word at a time for 30 years of his career. Like he's pissed people off by coming in to deliver an improv practitioner workshop and just making them play one word at a time for a whole day. And although there is a purist version of that game, he was totally up for what is the point of this and then how can we reinvent it. So I remember hearing like my rulesy brain or my competitive brain or something when someone was like, yeah, so we just started, I think it was Sim and Alex were like, yeah, we just started doing half a sentence at a time, and I was going, oh, that's not the game, like being my critic going like no, and Lee was like, great, how did that work for you? And I was like, oh, this is the spirit that you have to be really sure that the practice you do already has value. Like you don't want to just go, oh well, it's rubbish, so we'll throw it out. But you have to be able to fight for it, the point of it, rather than, but I like playing it how I've always played it. Like he could hold really caring about his practice whilst then being willing to get rid of all the bits that weren't achieving the point and accepting new bits that were. And I like really respect that in Lee as a mentor and as a facilitator, like this willingness to go, I care deeply about this, I'm holding on tightly to the point of it, but I'm letting go of all of the ways I've done it already. And I
Yeah,
do think accessible practice has to be open to that, or you start to feel stifled, or like there's a scarcity of games, or like, oh shit, what's a deaf and hearing warm-up game? I don't know. Oh, we better not do it. You know, there's that kind of scarcity mindset sometimes in accessible theatre practice that makes us go like, oh, we can't do that because I can't figure it out in my head how it's going to work. Whereas in this one word at a time afternoon, everyone just got into pairs and went, oh fuck, you sign and I speak, and we, okay, how are we going to work? Or like, oh, okay, let's try this, and then a different option, and then a different option, and then we'd swap partners and we'd take the learning around. And I think that just speaks to the spirit of the week for me, was like we're really caring and we're really letting go of stuff at the same time.
Yeah. You spoke about Sim and Alex's one, which I was obsessed with because they tried something called like takeover, where someone would be signing part or gesturing or whatever part of the story until the other person took it over. So, for example, they would be miming brushing their teeth. The other person would yank the mime of the toothbrush out of their hand and then use it as like mascara. And then the other person yanks it and it becomes something else. And that one was really fun because it was really quick. And that is, oh my God, you have to have such a good improv brain to look at something and within the moment be like, I know what I'm going to turn that into.
Yeah.
And then, and then the game becomes one that echoes lots of other games that you play in drama, right? Like there's the freeze game where you freeze someone and you go in and you take on the shape that they're doing. So it's not that it was like brand new, but it was that we were finding the essence and then finding these games, which was just, yeah, really fun.
Well, yeah, we were like merging games, like it felt like yes and to me as well. Like and actually that was great to be pulling on all of those practices and going, okay, how can we mix them together in a new way?
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a great warm-up day because the tasks were like simple and we ended up finding the gestural way to adapt them quite quickly. And we were like, oh, like, deaf storytelling is it's so like within the bones already because it's like part of a language and visual vernacular and stuff like that. So that all came quite easy. And then day 2,
so day 2,
when Phelan came in, one of the co-artistic directors of Improbable, and Phelan uses a technique by, is it Jonathan Whelan? I want to say Jonathan. I'm gonna go ahead and say Jonathan, and if it's not, it's some other name beginning with J. But the Whelan technique of instant acting, and Phelan really swears by this and loves using it in his own rehearsals. And he said, has had to like fight for being able to use this way of working because it can be a bit slow, but he so much believes in the results that it gives that he, believes in that process. And so he brought his knowledge of instant access to us and taught it to
acting.
us. What did I say?
Instant access, but I love that too.
There we go. That's what we were aiming for. Instant acting. No, you're right. What it is that the actors in a scene will record their lines and record them orally. Orally, is that the right word for that?
Yeah,
We're using their voice, record them orally, and then they would record the lines in a monotone way with no acting, no emotion or anything, just factually recording their lines, and very, very slowly. And then, and this is the first time they've ever rehearsed the scene, then they would do the scene whilst playing out that recording from a speaker, and they would just be walking in the scene. They wouldn't be acting it out. They wouldn't be saying the lines. And it takes away all that pressure of like needing to know your lines and things like that, and just gets you into your body. So like, oh, where do I feel like moving on the stage in this moment? Where do I, kind of, where are my emotions sitting when that line hits me and things like that.
Phelan's idea is that there is only one thing you need to know as an actor for all of acting, which is the you make a choice of, if you're standing opposite somebody in a scene, does this moment want to take me forward, make me go backwards away from them, or rooted still in the space? And he was like, that's acting. That's the whole of acting. And you kind of like, oh my God, 3 years of drama school for a lot of people, it would tell them completely differently. But actually what we found was that was true. And you were using that, right? Because you were the participating actor in this exercise. Yes. And you were just deciding, where does my body want to go, with no set in the first time, right?
Yeah, and for me, I don't think it's an exaggeration. I was like, that is all I need to think about, is whether I am compelled to move towards this person, away from them, or stand still. And those movements then mean so much and carry so much weight that naturally, well, maybe as a person or maybe as an actor, but naturally you are then translating that into emotions and into like you're putting all this meaning onto why you're having those instincts in that moment.
That come from your body, right? And the other thing that's really important when you do the when you do the scene with the recording playing is you have to keep eye contact all the time, which of course people fail at. But the idea is that the base level is you're in total eye contact with your scene partner. And they say that you should only develop your ideas about a scene in relationship with the other people on stage. So it should never be that you go away into your bedroom, learn your lines. Like Phelan doesn't get any actors to learn their lines. You have to come in, not learn your lines, and you only learn about your character in relationship to the other characters on stage. And Lee said, for clarity, if it's a one person show, it's in relationship with your audience. But like that you don't go away and go, I'm going to say it like this. Actually, I think if I put the emphasis on this word, that'll be super powerful because that's really cerebral. What you do is you find out where your body takes you, and then you trust that. And that's a
Yeah,
huge thing for actors because actors are so used to being told, oh, your instinct there was wrong. I want you to do something different.
yeah. And
But
Phelan was saying he trusts the actors more than anyone to know what their character instincts are, or even if it's not the character, even if it is you as an actor on stage. I guess it's back to that thing of not fighting reality. It's like, but that is the actor that is on stage, so we can only work with their instincts, and if you block those, then you're blocking like a naturalism of acting. So
yeah.
we did that scene a few times where, like you say, the first time we just did it working on this impel, repel, compel instinct, and there was no set. The second time we brought in some set and we could interact with that as well. So I'm just getting a phone call. Let me just put that down. So all those different instincts, and each time in between, you record the lines again. Each time aiming for monotone, but aware of the fact that some emotion might creep through from the version that you just did, because each time you're doing it, you're learning new things about your characters, new things about how those lines might sit within that moment, and what instincts are coming up when you're having those lines like at that moment. So that was the aim of that, and that's how you do it, but it was a completely hearing focused exercise.
The two main barriers being you are meant to receive this audio information and stay in eye contact with your scene partner, right? Like, and I want to know a bit because you were the person doing it. Obviously, what we saw for me, it felt electric and very live between you and Becky, and then Sophie when she replaced Becky later. Like the scenes I saw felt so rich, and I didn't know the play text. You were doing "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf," and I'm afraid to say I've never seen or read it.
Believe it, I
Um,
had no idea what was going on. It was great.
yeah, and I was deducing new information. And the other thing Phelan says is never do the same thing again. At least the first time you go through this process of doing this recording and acting, recording, acting, recording, acting, I think it's 5 times, and then eventually you get to do the scene and you say your words. And he says actors actually don't realize, but because they've done it so through their bodies, they remember everything. But I want to know from you, like, whenever I do these exercises that are about getting into my body, I can get there, but there is still like a brain or a critic that I'm trying to get away from. And I've been really invited to not be there, but occasionally, it slips and I go, oh my God, is what I'm doing making sense? Did you find that? Like how much did it encapsulate you? What was your experience of working with the like of that eye contact? Like what was it like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very lucky in that we're doing this exercise in a room with people that I've set up a company with 10 years ago. I'm extremely safe in that space, and I know that. So I think it is particularly easy for me to feel safe in that moment, and therefore maybe my critic is quietened because of
That's
that.
great.
Yeah, but of course there are small moments where you think like, oh, was that right, was that good, is this interesting, and also because it's a rehearsal, because it's not the final thing, there are moments where you're not doing it properly, like where you aren't, where I'm like, oh, I don't have an
Mm.
impulse right now, and oh, I just need to check back in, like in the very last one we did, Phelan said, and now say the words. And it was actually in this really emotional moment where Sophie and I had gone through the scene, no words, we weren't speaking our lines, but it had really reached a peak of emotion, and the scene ended, and her and I both burst into tears. And Phelan said, "Don't stop, like just let the scene carry on." And he said, "Now say your lines." And he was like, just I said a line that I thought was in the show, and he said, try and get the line right. So obviously for a moment I had this little thing come back to me like, oh, I don't know the line, but I know that that's the whole point of this method, is like that you don't know your line. So in that moment, sure, I was thinking about it, but really I think that intense eye contact with Sophie in the last, or with Becky in the ones before, but the intense eye contact sort of meant that there wasn't the room to be in my own head, because I
Yeah.
was so looking at someone
Right.
in a way that you don't do normally. Like, it is so weird to perceive someone so much. Not and
That's so true. Yeah. Like, how could you think of
you.
anything else?
No, yeah, like I was totally drawn in by their eyes. I was totally thinking about the fact that they were looking at me. Like, every time my face changed, it might have a reaction on their face, and then I'm witnessing their face change, and they're witnessing my face change, and we're just in this incredible connection, which meant that
Mm.
really thinking about anything else was sort of impossible. And it created a connection between I didn't even know what the characters were, and it created this connection between us in a way that I could never have like thought my way there. It
No.
was a truly instinct, gut like rooted connection with another human who I literally don't even know if they're meant to be my girlfriend or my mum. And yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was so amazing, and I'm so glad that Phelan reminded us to like the whole point of the wheeling technique is that the director doesn't direct anyone. I think eventually, if something is either really working or really not working, they might say,
Yeah, and also, I mean, I do understand this idea of not being directed, but I thought about this a lot over the weekend, and I think actually the director's role is really important in that, because I think what you are is inspired, and I think in a way that inspiration from a director is directing, but it's not direction in the sense of like telling you where to go or what to be. But it's this kind of like real desire to play and to trust and to like push yourself further in this safe way. And also, Phelan was sat on the side, and he was like really nodding when he felt that we were being
"Oh
truthful, and
yeah,
I felt really held by him. So
oh, I don't think he's
there's
ever saying, yeah, the role
yeah,
of a director isn't important. I think it's actually you've got to be the pinnacle person saying at the moment where you feel the most vulnerable and you're not sure if you're going to look like shit on stage because actors are taking this huge risk of vulnerability. I'm telling you, you can trust yourself, and that is like
yeah.
massive. But
And I
obviously,
think actors need constant reminding of that, even in the
mm,
middle of a 30-second scene. Like, it's going, no, I've got you, no, I've got you, no, I've got you, and it's a very vulnerable,
yeah.
right?
And
And
Phelan just says yes, yes. And we were saying you might actually need a light to remind a deaf actor, yes, yes, yes. Um, but I think it's really interesting that you don't cerebral like we don't come out of the scene and go, oh, I loved when you guys did that really intense bit where you got really close to each other or anything. Like eventually those comments might come in, but actually Phelan will direct an entire process just going, okay, record again and go again, record again and go again. And you do that 5 times with these different rules and stuff that we probably don't have time to get into, but like, and then play the scene
yeah,
and you've suddenly got your words there. And I think it's really interesting to me as a director because the pressure on directors, and I think we've really flipped this on its head by having Rachel as a director, is to have this like sort of magic overlord view of whatever is going on. And actually, no one needs that. What they need is to be charged up with the excitement of being very present with themselves and to know that that's okay and that that is wanted and then to occasionally have like the cherry on the top, you know, reassurance or actually yeah when the light is there so you will have to go over there at that point and then those limitations can come in but it starts from this completely free place and I love that. It felt
and
like
you,
improv even though it was text based and very rigidly to the text.
yeah, and you as a director watching it, were you having like waking dreams of like, oh, this is how I want to, like, this is how I could adapt my process of directing
Yeah,
or
I mean, my favorite sessions on night shift were where we did something a bit like this. We dipped a toe, we barely got in the water of it, but I think that pressure to always have this. I think it's a very masculine pressure, and I think it's a very sort of colonialist sort of view to go like, oh, it's all on me, and Phelan was saying like some actors really like being directed, because then if the play's not very good, they can say, oh, well, it wasn't my fault. But I really like being in the ship with everybody together. And I still, when I watched Phelim direct in the My Neighbor Totoro room, what I saw was someone who was electrically present. And actually, as a director, I often feel very pressured to have my head on across everything, across all of the scheduling of time, of the script edits, of production meetings, of pastoral care, of all of these things. And what I saw in Phelim, and I think there's some things that play in about him being an older, established, and he'd say the same, white guy in the arts who can say, my job is literally just to stand here and be present with my actors. And of course, that's not all Phelim does. And but I remember feeling this like envy of like, I would like to just be paid to be, or whatever, I don't care, I don't mean it in a money way, but like, I'd love my job to be being incredibly present whilst everyone in a room engages with themselves in a really present way. Because I have a huge meditation practice which I gain loads from, and all of the words where, when Phelim says, of course you can't always be present with this, and of course you'll drift, but then when you come back it's good. That's the same as what a meditation instructor says to me when I meditate. I want that for everyone. It's so electric, and then it's not all, I'm not going home thinking like, I gotta fix this, I gotta spear this thing, and I don't think I want to operate in my life like that. I have to have a battle with my inner control freak around that, but I think I've been moving towards this want to have community and communal process
Mm.
all my life, really, and
Yeah.
I have to get out of the way of it myself, but also gain that permission to not have to play the role
Yeah.
of that kind of director, which I think requires a high tolerance for people thinking you're a bit mad or a bit shit for a really long time, because you're not going to be asserting that dominant thing. But you still have to be assertive about the practice being important. Anyway, we've got really waffly. I've got really waffly now, but
No, not at all. Yeah, you answered the question I asked you.
mm,
This exercise that we did, this instant acting, was then the bit that I felt was maybe the most sticky of the 3 days, was when we tried to explore how could that particular method be translated into a BSL using process. And at the time, I think we were all like so on board for trying, and I'm so glad that we all did try. And I would say probably our end reflection is like, maybe we just don't need to do that exact exercise, but we love the essence of it, and we're going to find the essence in other things. But what we explored was how to do this recording and playing back visually. So we had iPads, which we strapped to, well, they strapped to the chests, their own chests of William and Stephen, to deaf BSL using actors that were in the room who are brilliant. And they filmed themselves signing the lines very slowly. And then we pressed play at the same time on both of the iPads. And then they did the same things of walking into the scene without set, then with set, and then trying to do this scene in which they were only prompted by the video playback of themselves signing,
mhm.
which, is clunky because you do have to break eye contact. They had to look down at the iPad as well as looking up at the person. So that already is different than when you're just relying on hearing and being able to keep eye contact whilst you're listening to your lines. So that was one thing that they said it felt kind of was taking them out of it.
And they were also visually taking themselves in. I got really interested in this mechanic thing of like, if for me as a hearing person, hearing something doesn't take me out of what I'm focusing on. Like, I can hear background music and it's sort of here, and I can hear my voice saying lines I already know the essence of, and it's kind of just here. If you put a mirror in front of me, or if you played me a video of myself, or I was looking at a photograph of myself, I think that visual information just triggers way more thought or way more brain space than I don't love hearing my voice on a recording, which I hope I don't have to listen to this podcast, but I don't love hearing my voice in a recording, but I can do it and stay very present with what I'm doing, if it and it kind of takes out the language function in my brain as well. Like, if I'm listening to words,
Mm.
I can't be looking at words, I can't be thinking in words at the same time. So it's like a really different thing. And then receiving sign language on the chest, I think it was kind of offering them, oh, this is how you could embody it, but it's a neutral. So I actually burst out laughing when William had to sign a line that was like, "I'm grieving for my life. I'm not happy," and
It was
and
so
he said,
funny.
"I'm unhappy," and I found it so funny just watching this sign be so neutral, partly because William's such a like expressive person normally.
Yeah, and
Um,
such a clown anyway. Like we all absolutely lost it at that moment.
yeah, it was I felt very guilty, but it was very, very funny in itself. But yeah, I can really understand how seeing yourself on video triggers way more self-awareness loops than hearing your voice and being embodied. Could because you're having to be in your body and BSL is already in the body. Something interesting there. I actually think we only did two
Yeah,
tries, and what they were starting to say was, oh, I don't need to take in the whole line because I can kind of get the essence of it. Sign gives me so much context that I can get the essence of it. So actually I think they probably could have got to a point where they were spending less time looking at themselves, which would have reduced that issue. But even I just noticed, like, even just in how we teletubbied them,
yeah, yeah,
it was they couldn't move in the same way that you and Sophie could because they had iPads on their chests.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You guys were drinking water in your scene. I was like, they can't do that because we'd all be going, oh my God, what about the iPads? There's a precariousness about having a bit of tech strapped to you that is also just in a really obvious way a bit
Yeah,
limiting.
actually, talking about that, something which we didn't get to try, and just time and everything. But Sophie Woolley, who was on this, um, suggested using projection could be a way to have it really easily be seen. Like it's so much bigger that you can sort of take in the information peripherally, especially if you're doing
Mm.
just that, like feeding the beginning of a line. So you could still record the sign language, but have it up in a projector. I was wondering whether you do actually need the same person as is the performer signing, but we didn't get to. I didn't really like explore that with people, but potentially having someone else just feeding the sign. I'm not sure though, because yeah, in instant acting you do kind of benefit from it being your voice and being able to add your own emotion slowly onto the lines. But yeah, I think there was more exploration that could be done around that.
Something I found really interesting on that day was Stephen, who's a deaf actor, talking about how, as a deaf artist, this idea, because the whole point of the Whelan technique is like instant acting technique, sorry, is that you can do anything and you're not telling the story to the audience. There's no interest in the audience. Like I've seen versions of this where people just stay in the wings or have their back to the audience the whole time, or they do stuff where you're like, well, the stage is a third of the size of the space you've just taken up, but it's okay because it's all just building these textures that will eventually then lead you to doing it in time and space with an audience. But it's very freeing in terms of movement. And something Stephen said that's really going to stick with me is he said, even turning to my side or turning my head as a deaf actor feels like letting an audience down. And I think I spoke to like this fear that we all feel in accessible theatre practice. And Stephen saying that really, I just thought, God, how restricting to feel like you can't turn your head without letting down access because sign language needs you to see expression and if I turn to my side, will you be able to understand me? Whereas I don't think hearing actors have the same pressure of like, oh, I'm going to say this line a bit quieter, or someone at the back might not quite hear me because there's kind of, oh, we'll get a microphone or whatever. There's like fixes around that, and just that restriction of it's not just that I might make bad art, but it's that I might do bad access, and that feels even more like difficult to grapple with as a risk because we're inviting in a community that's been let down by a lot of theatre that can't go to see a lot of shows because they're not accessible. So when we do it, we need to be amazing all the time. And I think deaf artists really feel like the translation needs to be not just what's right from the gut of the character, but what's exactly clear for the audience. But actually that means that things feel a bit less gut focused. And he said, I could actually feel my gut. So although the iPads felt clunky, I think having that option of I'm still doing the scene and I'm taking in the language, but I'm not having to sign right now for an audience of people was really like remarkable to kind of hear about that restriction that's normally felt of like until the translation's perfect and the BSL can be seen, then I can be an artist around that. That feels really limiting. And he was saying like I don't know, it really affected me, kind of hearing like I can't even turn my body without feeling like I'm letting someone down. That is not a restriction that a hearing process would put itself through.
Yeah. And to be clear, like I've seen deaf plays where they have played with that, like,
Yeah.
and there's so much play that is able to, like, that is still yet to be done and stuff like that, and that is already happening. And William was like giving suggestions. He's like, oh, you know, I'd love to like explore using mirrors one day so that like I could turn to the back, or a camera following me, or different things. So
Mm.
there's loads of creative, like, juicy stuff to explore with that. But that's sort of where we got to with that exercise, wasn't it? We got to that moment of being like, okay, this could work, but it feels more like we're trying to jam something into working than
Yeah,
like.
people use this sign a lot, like two
Yeah,
hands trying to ram themselves together.
I was doing it and I was like, how do I
Working.
put this into words?
Yeah.
Yeah, with that one. But still, like, I mean, you know, still everyone was really like learning from it, and interested in it. And I think that was.
Yeah, I felt throughout that day a lot of my access police instincts were really firing off, because it felt like a very hearing cultured room for a while, because it had to be, because the point was we had said this to people: we're going to show you this. Phelan's going to share with us this practice as it is, and it isn't accessible. Obviously, with interpreters, obviously with the add-ons, but that's not what a Zoo Co room normally feels like, or whatever. And then we'll play with this. And I did really feel that tension that you spoke about, that stickiness of like, oh, Fleur, I'm watching Fleur get a lot out of this technique, and I still don't quite know how it's going to work for a deaf actor yet. And that feeling like, oh, but you kind of had to go through that to then get these images of like the iPad thing came from me watching. I had a suspicion about it, but I hadn't got it. And it wasn't a perfect solution. I'm not sure it's something I don't know that we'll be strapping iPads to actors' chests to do it in rehearsals yet, but I would love to spend 3 more days working on it.
Yeah. And just one thing before we move away from it was that, so when I did this scene, with the hearing reliant way of doing the technique, I was working with Sophie, who does use a cochlear implant occasionally, and didn't pick up all of the lines. So we also had that middle ground where it was like it wasn't fully accessible to her in that way, but she really wanted to try it in that way. So like we did also have this a different version of that experience, and we actually really used in the scene the fact that she didn't get all of the lines, and it made the scene really electric. How useful that was to the end goal, I don't know, but we loved working with that kind of like, she was getting half the information, she was finding that really like an interesting experience.
Yeah, Sophie's great for being like in the shit on stage, but being like, God, wasn't that great that I
Yeah,
couldn't? And you're like, not everyone would feel like that,
yeah,
but she's great for kind of embracing that. And we were all feeling it, because the sound was kind of a bit clunky, and the
yeah,
connection with the Bluetooth speaker wasn't working very well. So I
and
knew she was receiving it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the next day we didn't have Phelan with us on the next day, but we were sort of we went back to our sessions and we looked at what was hot and cold still. So we moved some sessions that had been done, including blackberry picking, but also improv games and like things. And what boiled up was, oh, instant acting. What is the essence of it when we don't have to kind of recreate this technique and strap iPads to people? And then immediately the whole group was like, that's what's on the thing. But after checking, I think all of us sort of wanted a bit more of the spirit of Tuesdays, like fun and games a bit. And we ended up playing Foreign Lecturer,
Yeah,
which is a game that Lee plays at the Comedy Store all the time, which is where someone comes on, speaks in gibberish as if they're the professor of an impossible topic like ziplining and baking, as a combination.
yeah,
And somebody else, which was you did the translation role, has to interpret into English what is being said. So obviously lots of playing with language already. So Lee comes on and goes like blah 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 blah, and Fleur goes, I'm an expert in ziplining and making cupcakes at the same time, or whatever. You were much funnier than that. And so there's a lot of gesture and mime in the gibberish speaker, and there's a lot of like, the interpret. It's a really great yes and, because you take what he gives you, and then he takes what you give him, and we played with that in loads of ways. Lee had a session on the wall that was like, what about we just hang out with each other? And it felt a bit like a morning of doing that. And then it really got us like fired up and playful. And I think I really learned from those sessions that felt playful and like things we wouldn't put in a show were critical to creativity. And Phelim said something that stayed with me, which was like playfulness in a rehearsal room is a very good thermometer check for
Yeah,
how safe people feel or how brave people feel or how trusting they feel, because being playful requires those things to be in place. No one wants to play like a child if
mm,
they feel like they're going to get wounded, like a child might get wounded. So
yeah,
it actually replenished my sense of community after a day of stickiness and kind of going, oh, how does this work? And a lot of intensity. It was a real replenishing thing. I think we have to remember that for rehearsals. How do we keep people playful, even if we're making a play like Night Shift, which is pretty bleak? Like, how do we keep that spirit and care about it? Because it then we got to extraordinary results in the afternoon. So yeah, we did Foreign Lecturer. We played around with different like BSL functions. Is there anything you want to say about that game particularly?
Oh, I was just going to riff off the fact that you were saying, yeah, it is the stuff around the actual work that you need to do that makes the actual work really good. It's like not by
Mm.
working on the work that actually it gets better. For us, anyway, we found within 3 days it was by working on not the work that made us make excellent work. So surely that just goes to show you that that is the work.
And
Um,
I'm gonna have to remind myself of that in week 3 of rehearsals when I'm going like, we don't have time for community building. We just need to get on with it. And I'm going to tell everyone what to do because that is so my instinct at that point, and lots of people's instinct. And what lots of people want from me at that point is like, you can't be fucking about anymore, Flo. You've got to get this show on the road, kind of thing.
yeah. I think what we found with that, with the foreign lecturer one was it was being translated either way. Like it was a nonsensical or not nonsensical, but a non-language based thing being translated into language. So it actually didn't matter whether that language was then English or if it was BSL or sign supported English or whatever you use. And then it was just about, okay, then how do we then relay that to the audience? So if we translated it into English, an interpreter would then translate that into BSL, and if it was translated into BSL, that was then interpreted into English for people in the audience who needed that. But I will never forget Alex James coming on as an ice skater that could graffiti
Yeah.
and just coming on with the most energy I've ever seen anyone enter a scene with.
So much sass.
So much sass. Every single person is like, I will never forget that. It was so good. And I think it was like all the things about playfulness and the spirit of improv is just like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to come on and give it my
And
absolute.
Alex is just, yeah, I was saying like everyone took care of different aspects of improv, but the thing that Alex brings in the bucket load is just this fuck it, I'm going to get in the shit and find my way out approach to everything. That is literally magic. Like it's just so it's so it is so unblocked. She's so unblocked as an artist, and like she just brings so much of that. I was her translator, and I felt myself. She set the bar really high, and I had an experience of self criticism of like I'm failing her because I can't. I'm in my head and I can't quite. I was also trying to. She told me to speak and sign at the same time, and there was lots of like little conversations about how for improvising that bilingual approach where you're kind of speaking and signing together, you can kind of hear in my voice that I'm doing it now. There's like a little bit of a jilt, like one language will outrun the other, and you can't keep up with yourself, and you kind of get into a bit of a self loop or something. I think I'm gonna really think about how I use those two modes when I'm trying to say something expressive that's coming from my gut or my body, because I found that it's a little bit like tapping your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time. So I felt really restricted, or like I was limited by this, either by myself. I was like, I'm glad I've got this thing about bilingualism to blame, because it could just be that I wasn't good enough otherwise.
I just
But
don't
you
believe
know,
that
like,
for a second.
but yeah, it was that was really fun. And then Stephen kind of came and said, "Well, look, we've got some deaf improv games. Let me share these." And we did and it almost felt naughty to be allowed to play with sign language like this, because
Yeah.
we wouldn't put this on stage, I don't think, or we would really think about how we framed it, because it was about putting your hands through someone else's body and signing for them.
Yes, they sort of put their hands on their hips, then you stand behind them and put your two arms through their armholes under their
Yeah.
shoulders, under their armpits, and then your hands do the sign language instead of them. Oh, it was funny.
I
It
nearly
was
wet
so
myself. Stephen signing for Lee, who Lee doesn't understand sign language. So he was trying to do a job interview and Stephen's signing really clearly. And Lee's just having to, at one point he was trying to sign, yeah, I've got lots of experience or something. And he said, do you like my moustache, Lee? And I just cried with laughter because it was really like, and I don't know how you make that accessible back to a deaf audience. And I don't know that you have to, but in
Yeah,
our
because that version was the person behind was deaf, their hands were going through and was signing, and then the person in front was hearing and didn't know sign language, which is actually there were a few people in the room that was the case, so we used Lee for every example. But then they were translating what they thought the sign meant, so there was loads of comedy in the two languages being like there being
Which
miscommunication.
actually was one of the sessions on the wall was like, how can we enjoy or make space for communication failure? Because it's something we worry about all the time in our processes. Or like, oh, communication's broken down. It's like one of the worst things you can hear. It's like, oh, something's on fire. But in improv, communication breaks down all the time. And when you can find your way through it, if you just give up at that point, the audience goes like, oh my God, that was awful. But if you're like willing to name what's happened and be like, I think I missed that. Can we go again? And kind of come back through it, the audience loves seeing that like chaos to resolution
Yeah.
journey or whatever.
I loved the arms through because I felt like the end point that we got to really got the essence of it, because Stephen was saying they normally play it at Deaf Club, like, or they did when he was younger, and it was just about like it's just funny to see someone else's hands like sign, and the other person has to like just react to it and like go with it. And then we tried it in this bilingual way, so it was the sign and then someone that didn't sign trying to translate it and then that being funny. And then in the end we got to a point where it didn't matter if the person with the arms through knew sign language, they could make it up. And it didn't matter if the person in front knew or didn't know sign language or would speak or not. None of it mattered. What was funny is that someone was controlling someone else with these gestures and stuff.
Like four people are trying to tell a two-person story and these bodies have to move together. There was one really funny moment where my job was to get Stephen to decorate a Christmas tree. I was the arms behind person. And all I was trying to do was get him to bend down to pick up a bauble. But he'd had this story in his head that I'd made him a burlesque performer. So as I was bending down just to functionally pick up a bauble, he was doing like a little slut drop and like bringing it up and being sexy with
Yeah,
it. I
and all
couldn't
of
get him to
that.
lean down enough, but I couldn't see him doing
No,
that. So the
exactly. And all of
comfort,
it was gesture. Like none of it
yeah.
was language
And him
based.
like sexing it up and pouting and stuff, and I couldn't see that. All I could feel was his body not bending down and going like, why is this so hard? And the audience were howling with laughter because they knew what I was trying to do
Yeah, so
and
that
taking.
version was where we said, okay, so if none of those things matter, and if actually what we're watching that is funny is this control of someone else, and how that will always go wrong, and that's the funny bit, we said, okay, let's do that. So where we're just using gesture, but we added on two little things. One was that the aim was that the two people were going to be doing some tasks, and the second thing was that the audience were going to know what those tasks were and were going to choose them. So we got the two people who would be in front, we got them to go away and either not listen or look away. And then with the audience, we discussed what the three tasks were going to be. And one of them, as you said, was decorate a Christmas tree. And then those people came back, and it meant that the audience were in this position of knowledge. And that was hilarious. And much like lots of other improv games where the audience are in on the secret and then they're watching people just be totally in the shit. And you're watching people really trying to go with it.
Yeah,
That's what's so funny,
I
because
think
they
that's
want
yeah
to
that
succeed and they
that's
can't.
just made me think about how much the audience gets told about what's happening in Perfect Show for Rachel before it starts. Like we're kind of like, these are the rules, this is what we're aiming for. So they're really on board with us as performers struggling to achieve Rachel's vision like all the time. I guess there's like a real decision we can make in our shows of like, is this are we playing a game? If yes, do we want the audience to know about it? How much do we want them to be with us, or how much we want them to be surprised? Because I think both of those are really exciting things for making it electric between you and the audience. Like they're in the cheeky atmosphere with you, willing you
Cheeky
on.
is so fun. I love it so much. I love improv for like all the. I love it for the failing and the naughtiness and all of that.
Yeah, and it felt like such freedom. It just felt like we were able to take off this frown of like, well, who gets to use this language? And that's me saying that as, like, I'll go back to worrying about that after this workshop. Like, the workshop was a really special magic melting pot of, like, we're actually all going to give each other a lot of permission here to do a lot of things and fail and be shit, and we're not saying we're going to put it on stage. And I think there's a whole different responsibility for a company about what you put on stage and what you share and fund, and, you know, in all those ways. But it was really fun to just acknowledge, like, the diversity of language in the room was all okay. And what you do is you go, who wants to play this game? 4 people get up and you go, right, okay, we've got a fluent interpreter, we've got a hearing actor who can't sign, we've got a hearing actor who can sign, we've got a deaf person who won't be able to hear the hearing person. Okay, what are we going to do about that? Rather than going, okay, we need 4 deaf people now, or 4 like, not making those, like, working with the people who come, the right people in each of these games, and forming the game around them, rather than being so rigid in the rules that you say only hearing people can do this, only deaf people can do this. I loved that.
Yeah.
And then
And
in
then
the afternoon,
we moved on to something slightly more serious in a way, like less like
people said, like, we need the yin to the yang, we need to slow down a bit. We've had, like, a gorgeous, really silly fun and games morning, and we want to get a bit more still now.
yeah, and we were still talking about this. What is the essence of instant acting? And Lee, in all his wisdom, suggested that we try atmospheres, which is something that we've actually done in the Perfect Show rehearsals a little bit in a different room. So we sort of already knew that that was possible. And you guys started working on atmospheres. I left the room for a little bit in this law of fluidity, so I'll let you talk about that first little bit.
Yeah, we were talking about atmospheres, which is this idea. It's a Chekhov practice. Although I was explaining this to someone last night who said, which Chekhov? And I said, nothing.
Anton Chekhov. What? Who's the, oh, don't come at us with who are the other ones.
No, don't. We're going to sound like such fools. Anyway,
Michael
this
as well. I'm going to Google
Carry on. I think there's a Michael, but I could be wrong.
I said
I felt really silly. Anyway, one of the Chekhovs.
No, it's M Chekhov. Michael.
It's Michael Chekhov, right? Great. I will let the person know. So don't come at me with your academia right now. I don't have enough to go on. I'm very tired. But so it's this idea that in any scene, in any show, everyone is in one atmosphere, and there can only be one atmosphere on stage. So it could be the atmosphere of a storm brewing, the atmosphere of I can only think of the word fart, the atmosphere
or grief, or you're in a scene that is set in an atmosphere, because that's real life.
Yeah, and
you can experience that completely differently. Like, you could be in real life, you can experience an atmosphere, like, you could be at a funeral and it's either the love of your life, or it's, I didn't know this person very well. You're in the atmosphere, but you could be having completely different experiences of it.
It's an external communal thing that's in the air between you and everyone else, like, as if the air is thick with it. Like, you might imagine it like a colourful smoke going between you, that you may or may not be breathing in, and you may or may not be operating as part of, and that everything you say or sign within that atmosphere is connecting to everyone else who's in it. And I always say, like, the only way I can really relate to this is, like, in real life, when we're having, like, a really profound time in a rehearsal room, and then, like, at our venue where we normally rehearse, there's just, like, a lot of people who accidentally walk into rehearsal rooms. So we'll be, like, having this amazing time, and everyone's done a big check-in, and, like, there's a real community. Like, the atmosphere is like wanky artists having an incredible time, and then, like, some builder will walk through and you're like, you must sense this atmosphere around you, but you're not in it. You've not been in that conversation. So we spent a little while moving around in different atmospheres. I think we had an atmosphere of hope. And then our group, I would say, wholeheartedly was like, we hear that it could be hope or grief or sadness or happiness, and we're going to choose completely different things.
Cobblestones is one that I saw.
Cobblestones, which was horrible for me, a real flashback to the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. And we had an atmosphere of, loads of different things. And Lee and Fleur and I were like, oh, this is too easy almost. Like, this
Yeah,
isn't.
well, I guess because we were thinking like, oh, we've come to solve these problems of deaf and hearing collaboration. We've already done this in a deaf and hearing collaboration way, and we already know that it works. Like, there's a small amount of polishing to do on how do you give directions about like, okay, we're moving into the next atmosphere now. Like, how do you get that message to everyone in the room? We were like, we kind of already know this, but I'm so glad that we stuck at it.
Yeah. And
I'm so
Lee said something the day before, like in the morning, where we were trying to fix something and someone was going, oh, but that's a bit too easy. And he said, there doesn't have to be a problem. We can just be playing the game. And I was
glad.
like, oh, yeah, you're so right. And as we were saying it to her, I said, oh, I guess there doesn't have to be a problem. We are the job was, how do we stay alive on stage as a deaf and hearing company? And this might be a way in. So then we brought in we wrote a 4-line script,
Yes, the
which
script was
I'll say one of them, you say the other. I've been waiting for you for ages.
2 weeks, and then
I've
it
been
was
waiting for you for 2 weeks.
yeah. I can't. I will never forget watching that sign be done
I
really
can't believe I got it wrong. I wrote it.
Oh, then it was. I couldn't have gone any quicker.
She said, I'm not nagging you, but.
And then I said, "Do you really want to go there?"
So quite a broad script, just thrown apart. Like, one person writes one line, one writes another.
Yeah, and
And
also so short, right? Like not much
yeah,
to play with, just 4 lines.
yeah, I was thinking, give them more. But really, actually, you managed to extrapolate every single drop of meaning from this. And you and Sophie came back up as this amazing pairing that I'm so inspired by watching you guys artistically inspired. I just felt so rich.
Yeah,
Sophie's,
I
you're
got.
both you're both just such exciting improvisers. I know you'll hate me saying this, but like you're so crackly and live. Like you thrive when something might change or when something might be unexpected. And so does Sophie. And you're both so comfortable in the shit that I just have this trust, but therefore like electricity between you,
Yeah,
which is true of everyone that was down there. But just like it was just so rich between you guys. And I think because you'd already done the exercise the day before, there was like already this relationship developing. And the first one you did was through toffee, an atmosphere of toffee. And Lee encouraged you to go really slowly. You signed the lines, which was really incredibly evocative, like just because the sign was so embodied, in a way that I don't always see. Oh,
we were unstable for a moment, but I think we're back. Am I back? Am I here?
Flurry there.
Yeah.
I can see you talking, but I can't see. Hello?
Hello? Oh.
You're muted.
What? How?
You're on mute.
I'm not. I'm
Oh,
not.
now you're not. I can't see your video, but it's
Oh.
okay.
Yeah, it came up and said I was unstable, which tells me I don't know.
Oh no. Okay. Well, for me, when I was watching that, all I could see was these two women who'd been mining in a mine for like thousands of years. And of course, I'm not seeing toffee. I'm seeing like the effect of that atmosphere on you two as performers. And then you did and we
Yeah, and
started.
it's not that you are eating toffee, it's not that you are stuck in toffee, it's just that the atmosphere around you is toffee, which you could say is a very difficult task given to us by our lovely room of creatives. But for me, doing that scene, I didn't know what I was going to do before I walked on stage. And then as I felt that atmosphere of toffee, the way that I translated it was I felt like I was ill and every vein in my body was jamming shut like toffee would to your mouth, and everything was this incredible effort. And then what that translates to in the scene is that I was so tired of my scene partner, so frustrated with them, but in a way that I couldn't eat. I didn't even have energy to express because I was so ill. But
Yeah.
all I've had is one word, which is toffee.
Toffee.
It's got me to that place.
And the whole point is don't act around it. Just be in the atmosphere and see what happens to your body. And it was fascinating. And then you did atmosphere of a
Birthday party,
children's birthday party, and he was like, you're not at a children's birthday party, you're just in the atmosphere of one, which is like really hard to play. But what I learned from you and Sophie is that both of you do not want to be in the atmosphere of a children's birthday party at all. They're
I
like,
was so instantly sour, and
yeah,
Sophie sort of had this childlike, playful energy that I was like, oh yeah, I suppose children's birthday parties are supposed to be fun. But as an actor who's
yeah.
worked an actor, a children's entertainer for 8 years of
Triggered.
let me tell you, for me, there's nothing positive.
um, and then the next one was really interesting because Lee gave you a function that if either of you touched a table or a chair in the scene, the atmosphere would change. So the atmosphere at the beginning, and again, this is a riff on our group choosing the weirdest things they could possibly choose. We had the email, the EastEnders, doof, 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 doof,
Yeah,
that,
an
the theme
atmosphere of
tune,
cliffhanger, I guess.
an atmosphere of the EastEnders doof doof theme tune, and if you were touching any piece of furniture, if either of you were touching either piece of furniture, it would switch to being an atmosphere of.
Oh, we went on a walk in Boar Place because it's in gorgeous countryside. The night before, we'd gone on a walk where we were all given these bat signal radio things. Oh, I'm back. Hello, is my camera back?
No.
Okay, well, I accepted it, but yeah, we were given these things so that we could hear the bats echolocating on a different frequency than
like,
humans can hear.
like dolphin clicks.
It was like, and of course, someone in our freaking group said, "Yeah, just an atmosphere of that," which is like, what the fuck?
But what happened was a scene that, because we knew the game about the table and the furniture, anytime they got anywhere near, it was like this danger of switching atmospheres, and you could feel the scene shift. They weren't meant to play it out, they were just meant to, in their minds, go, okay, the atmosphere's changed from EastEnders theme tune to backclicks, and the shifts were just incredible. And actually what we ended up,
As an audience member, are you like, are there things that you're hoping for when you're watching those? Because obviously I was in it and it felt incredibly slow for me and I couldn't really imagine what the audience were taking away from it. I was taking away a lot as an actor, but were you like hoping that you would touch the table and switch? Were you hoping to like catch the atmosphere in us? Like what?
I don't think I had hope. I think I had like curiosity about like, oh, how is this showing up for these people? But mostly, and this is not always true of my brain. My sign name is jumps ahead. But mostly, I felt really with each beat because you were with each beat, and or at least I assume it's because of that. Like you guys were so present in that atmosphere, and perhaps I had enough information about what was going on that I could be present in it too, that I didn't feel like I had a critical brain. I felt like I had a presence brain. And then maybe the only thing that I was doing that was adding onto that was having a waking dream about, well, what is the set? Where is this happening? What is this relationship? But I was never, no, I think it would have bored me to be hoping for something.
Yeah.
And what was exciting about it for me was I wasn't hoping for something. I was just like, oh, anything could happen between this. But there was one bit where Sophie's hand just accidentally knocked, as she was signing, her hand knocked a piece of cutlery on the table. And it was like, oh my God, anything can happen. Like there's just this like electricness of that. And then
Yeah.
it also at that point clicked for me, oh, we're kind of doing the instant acting technique. We're just not doing the recording bit. And we're only working with 4 lines, which these actors are not overloaded by having to remember those lines, and they haven't decided how to say or sign them. And it made me think, well, actually, this repetition, but getting it into bodies. And no, the toffee run was for me a mining community play, and the last one you did was a scene between a mother and an adult daughter coming home from university or something, like completely different scenarios, but all of them layered on top of each other. And I think it reminded me of like there's some scenes I directed on Sirens and or on a few of our other plays where we've done a version or on the Young Company play recently where we do a version that is nothing to do with what will be on stage, but I can still sense it when it comes to the performance.
Well,
So no, I wasn't. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but I wasn't hoping for anything because I was really with you. And that isn't me saying I'm just always really present all the time. I just really felt it this time.
what was amazing for me being in it was that the last version that we did was, so we'd had toffee birthday
I'm just
party.
One sec. I'm just going to ask you to turn this on again to see if it works.
I've approved it again.
Oh, never mind. Maybe it's recording your end. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, start that sentence again.
No, I was just going to say, so we'd had these things which I was like, how the hell is this going to inform me at all? I mean, I didn't feel too cynical when I was doing it because I was happy to go with it, but like I couldn't foresee how it was going to inform the scene. So yeah, toffee, birthday party, bat echolocator, and EastEnders duff. And then Lee said, now just play the scene, but bring everything with you. And you know, again, Sophie and I hadn't discussed what is our relationship, none of that, but there was so much between us, and we came on and we did this scene, and I felt so many things towards her. I had a relationship in my mind. I didn't necessarily have a story because, you know, we were like you say, anything can happen, so I couldn't predict where it was going to go. Like when the bowl thing happened, when she knocked the spoon on the bowl, like I was,
it changed everything.
Yeah, and it changed.
Well, like the status between you just went like completely changed. It was really weird.
Yeah, and I fucking love being an actor in that because, and Sophie is incredible to act opposite because she is so unpredictable, so ready to change and be live in her performance. But I could not have got there if I'd have done, if someone had said, practice these lines 4 times, which is all we did, right? We did them, we went through it 3 times, and then that was the 4th one. And on your 4th performance, you're going to create something that is absolutely magical. It's like,
you and I are like, is there a show in this? You know, that's, I do not always feel like that in a workshop setting. Like you said, oh, but isn't it just like the feeling of what? And I was like, no, I sometimes feel electrified, but I don't feel like, oh, I now want to go find out about these 2 characters. You know, like,
yeah, we came away both being like, who are they? What is, and I was like, it's a mother and it's this, and the reason that they're annoyed is this. And we had 4 lines that we rehearsed 3 times.
Incredible.
So yeah, I think that got the essence of something really electric and alive in a way that felt accessible, and I really hope we get to use again. And that for me is like a huge win to come out of those 3 days. And
Lee always says like resist the story, but he actually accidentally landed like this amazing ending of like this problem in our mind, which was, the instant acting thing doesn't really work. How else could you get actors to be really present and connected and alive with each other on stage without planning and without directing them? And it was like, oh, there's a way that doesn't even have a problem woven within it. And that felt amazing. And something that someone said at the end when we were checking out was like that translation is always here, like on their shoulder as a deaf artist, like that they feel really
like the responsibility and the weight of it.
Yeah, and the function of it and the weight of the responsibility, exactly. And that this week had just offered them the chance to still hold it, but out from them. And I think all of these techniques where we don't fix what we're going to do before we've had a chance to explore it. I think that's my big learning is like, well, we've now been building in BSL Translations Week first, and then we give everyone a week to learn their lines or whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, we might want to do a week of exploration first, and then have everyone that, you know, we might reprogram how rehearsals work. I also have this fear of not having enough time, which I constantly feel.
It's true with funding.
Which is true. Yeah. It's true. If anyone has £10,000 after 1.5 hours with me and Fleur, give us more.
No, but what I was going to say is another thing that came out of that same person's checkout that you're talking about that weight of translation coming off was also that they said that watching us do atmospheres but with sign language, we, like in the toffee one, it was such an effort to move our hands to form these signs and to, like, you know, knock one finger down onto the other just to do a sign which normally would take you half a second, not even like a 0.0 of a second. And the fact that we had that in our body physically, the sign language, he was like, it was like you had the instinct in your body before you had translation, and it was that your body was melted into the sign in a way that he said sometimes the sign language can be outside of you and you're signing, but it's not actually, even though it is your body making it, it hasn't connected with that your inner core. And I really did feel like
we came in with this we came in with this like preconceived idea that maybe deaf actors are already more embodied because their language is in the body, and someone did an impression of no, look, this is how it can be
Yeah,
sometimes, kind of signed in an unembodied way. And I went, oh my god, I've seen that before.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
always, the incredible deaf artists won't aren't are embodied, but it's not a given, it's not an assumption. And
Well,
actually,
and also maybe this even shows like it's not about the incredibleness of the actor, but it's about the breathing space that you're given to have exploration, like you're saying, before translation or before learning of lines.
or
And
to even be told it's relevant or important for you to have a gut instinct that isn't from a BSL consultant or a director saying, stand there, deliver your lines, this is where the light will hit you.
and that's the essence of instant acting, right? It was that you don't learn your lines before you do it, and you get the privilege of having them recorded, so they're hitting you in, but you haven't had to go away and learn them. And so with this one, it was like we've had the privilege of the BSL
Mm,
coming into our body. And he even said actually that what you could do, because we'd done a very, very simple translation of those lines, we were just doing like 2 signs each for those very
mm.
short phrases. And he said you could originally do a very basic translation, very minimal signs of a scene, and then you could go away, get it into your body, and then you could come to a BSL consultant and get the more elaborate translation. But you'd already in your body.
Yeah, informing it from character and from body rather than what's the best linguistic option here for clarity. Because we don't, yeah, we offer that freedom to artists who are speaking on stage. We say use your voice how you want to use it, and occasionally we might note about diction or volume. But actually, yeah, I learned so much, and that last checkout without kind of saying who said what or whatever, because our checkouts are really, they are really sacred to us. It really felt like we just had a week of artists being artists, and what was alive in all of us was we want to keep doing this work. And I think Improbable said that, Zoo Co said that, and all of the freelancers that came together, just that this is rare and sacred and that we need time like this. And I cannot wait to be back in rooms with all of the people that we worked with. And I'm like trying to find out ways to do that because,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And time and funding and then the state of the arts in the UK or whatever just means like it really is hard to come together, like money wise, and
yeah,
justify like just being artists. And I've had the best time of my, I don't know, of many years. Like
yeah,
so,
me too. And feeling like, well, what is the point of us if we don't get really sharp about our practice and all of the riches that we can take from that? Just confidence, I think, in asserting like this is how we work and we're going to grapple with it rather than throw it out before we've tried it or whatever. Like I think,
and like crazy to think that you could become better at making theatre or better at making art without having time to play and be artistic and be
yeah,
it's like oh no there's no time or funding to be artistic, but like obviously that's how you
yeah, and it's like that's the only thing you want us to do is make some really great art. And after a show like Perfect Show, which obviously went so well,
yeah
you and I are now tasked with what the next thing is, what the follow up is to that. And we don't want to lose the electricity and liveness of Perfect Show for Rachel. We are interested in script or story led work, being, or at least we're not sure that it's going to be an improvised show, although hard to know. And this week just gave me some real excitement about that
mm,
because I'm quite scared. I'm quite scared of making the follow-up piece to that show, and I'm quite scared of all of my hopes and dreams having to go into a next project or a next few projects.
yeah
But this week just made me think, yeah, but once I know what it is, once you and I grapple with all of the like, oh shit, we don't know what it is and what are we going to get to, the process that's going to hold us is going to be so rich and exciting that actually we can go in with bits of ideas and not have to have this big spearhead story that we already know all the ends. How boring it would be if we knew what it was going to be before we went into day one.
yeah
Like, yeah.
yeah
I'm so grateful that we got to spend this time chatting through the project. Obviously, we've spoken loads. I think we said we'd try for 40 minutes, but I'm so grateful. My brain has processed so much information talking to you about, we speak all the time about our process, but we don't do it in a way that's really focused and intentional. And I think this has been really helpful for me, even if no one ever listens to it, to kind of get to grapple with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote notes of what we had done over the 3 days, and I said, yeah, we sort of said that the atmospheres exercise mirrored instant access, instant God, acting. But I'm unsure that it does. And what I've said in this is completely the opposite, because I've had space to dig
Yeah.
into it. It's so nice.
So I think both of us, to give some context to why we've recorded this, both of us were like, yes, I must write a blog about the week.
And I
It's
am
been very
fine to stand
profound.
that.
And neither of us wanted to do that. And anytime anyone asks us to write a blog at Zoo Co, it is normally me and Fleur that are meant to write these blogs. Other people seem to whack them out really easily, but we spend hours kind of either not doing it or doing it and grappling with it, or then editing and being worried about it. Whereas actually this has been a really great way for me to kind of think through that process. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.